If you're studying A-level philosophy and ethics or religious studies, subscribe. I'm covering the entire course on this channel. Situation ethics, an introduction. We have just completed one of the most important clusters in A-level ethics, utilitarianism, and you should now understand Bentham, Mill, the hedonic calculus, act and rule utilitarianism, and the justice problem that sits at the heart of the theory. But now we move to something quite different, a theory that also focuses on consequences but replaces happiness with something far more radical as its moral criterion: love. Not romantic love, not sentimental love, a very specific, philosophically loaded form of love that one man argued is the only absolute moral principle that has ever existed. And that man was Joseph Fletcher. And his theory, situation ethics, caused a storm when it was published in 1966 that has never quite died down. And this is the opening of our situation ethics series. And we're covering it fully for OCR, AQA, Edexcel. And by the end, you will understand where the theory came from, what it actually claims, and how to use it in your essays. Well, a good place to start is the historical background, to understand why situation ethics felt so urgent and so controversial. You're going to need to understand the world that Joseph Fletcher was writing in. So he was writing in what we call post-war America. The Second World War had shaken Western civilization to its foundations. Millions were dead. The Holocaust had happened, Hiroshima had happened, and many people were asking a genuinely disturbing question: had traditional moral religious authority actually prevented any of it? Trust in institutions was collapsing. Political authority, religious authority, moral authority, none of it was accepted automatically anymore, and people wanted reasons, not rules, handed down to them from on high. And thus we have the 1960s revolution. And if the post-war period had loosened the grip of tradition, the 60s tore it away entirely. Civil rights movements were challenging centuries of racial injustice. Second wave feminism was questioning every assumption about gender and power. The sexual revolution was dismantling codes around sexuality that had governed Western life for centuries. Old moral rules felt not just outdated, but actively harmful. Rigid codes seemed to protect institutions rather than people. And so there was a religious authority that was in decline. The institutional church was losing its grip on public and private life. And within Christianity itself, a generation of theologians were asking whether the faith needed to speak a new language, one that felt more human, more compassionate, and relevant rather than coldly legalistic. And Fletcher was one of those theologians as such, or philosophers. He was born in 1905. He died in 1991. And his answer to all of this was situation ethics. He was an Episcopal priest, and he was a serious academic ethicist who taught at Harvard Divinity School and the Episcopal Theological School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And in 1966, he published Situation Ethics, The New Morality, and the title tells you everything about what his ambition was. He was not offering a minor revision to existing ethical thinking. He was proposing something genuinely new. And here is a crucial exam point that students will often miss. Fletcher never abandoned Christianity. He's not an atheist philosopher attacking religion from the outside. He is working entirely within the Christian ethical tradition, reinterpreting it from within. His claim is that Christianity itself, properly understood, has always been about love, and that the church has buried that truth under centuries of legalistic rules. And this matters in your essays. When you evaluate situation ethics, you are evaluating a theory that sees itself as a more authentic expression of Christian ethics, not just a rejection of it. But why was it so controversial? Well, because Fletcher made a claim that struck many Christians as being heretical, that no moral rule is absolute. Not even rules derived directly from Scripture. The only absolute is the command to love. And so Fletcher was a precise thinker, and he began to do this by identifying 3 possible approaches to moral decision making. And he rejected 2 of them and proposed the third as his own. Let's look at legalism. He rejected this. Legalism is the approach that applies fixed rules rigidly to every situation, regardless of context. This is what Fletcher saw in both religious and secular moral codes, a suffocating framework of rules that claimed to cover every possible case in advance. Fletcher's objection is not just practical, it's philosophical. He argues that no set of rules can anticipate the full complexity of human situations. And when you apply a rigid rule to a situation, it was not designed for you do not produce justice, you produce absurdity or cruelty. Then there's antinomianism. He also rejected this, the opposite extreme. Antinomianism rejects all rules entirely. Every situation is treated as completely unique, with no guiding principle whatsoever. Fletcher considered this moral chaos. Without any framework at all, moral decision-making becomes arbitrary. And then you have situationism, which is Fletcher's own position, the middle way, if you like. You enter each moral situation carrying the wisdom of tradition. You know what the rules say. You know what experience teaches. But you are always prepared to set those rules aside if love demands it. And this is the middle way. And think about the connection to what you already know so far. Like Jeremy Bentham, Joseph Fletcher rejects fixed rules, but where Bentham asks what produces the most happiness, Fletcher asks what expresses the most love. It's a different criterion, but a similar structure. And then we come to part 2, Agapē, the only absolute. And this is the philosophical heart of the theory, and it deserves careful attention. Fletcher distinguished between 4 types of love, drawing on the Greek language, which has separate words for what English collapses into one. You have eros, romantic, passionate love, self-interested. You love because of what you receive. Then you have philia, friendship and affection, preferential. You love your friends more than strangers. Then you have storge, family love, instinctive and partial. You love your children differently from how you love others. None of these, Fletcher argues, can form the basis of ethics. They are all partial, conditional, preferential. They favour some people over others. Agapē is different. It's unconditional love, selfless love, goodwill directed toward all persons equally, including your enemies, your strangers, people you dislike. It does not depend on what you receive in return. It does not favour the familiar over the unknown. And this is the love commanded in the Gospels, in the good news of the Bible. Love your neighbour, love your enemy, love without condition. And Fletcher's claim is audacious in its simplicity. This is the only absolute. Everything else in ethics is relative to the situation. The one unchanging question in every moral dilemma is, what is the most loving thing to do here? And Fletcher adopted as his maxim a phrase from St. Augustine, who you might recall from studying the problem of evil. Love and do as you will. If you truly love, you will act rightly. If you act wrongly, it's because you did not truly love. Now, this slide addresses one of the most important classification questions you're going to face in essays. And getting it right separates good students from excellent ones. Situation ethics and utilitarianism share a fundamental structure. Both are consequentialist. The morality of an action is determined by its outcomes. Both are teleological. Actions are judged by their ends, their purposes, what they are aiming at. This is why they sit in the same broad category of ethical theory. But they diverge in a way that is philosophically crucial. Utilitarianism measures outcomes in terms of happiness or preference satisfaction. It is quantifiable, secular, and impartial. Bentham's hedonic calculus tries to make the process almost mathematical. Situation ethics measures outcomes in terms of Agapē. It is grounded specifically in Christian love, and it resists reduction to calculation. You cannot run Agapē through a formula in the same way that Bentham tried to run pleasure through his calculus. And here's the exam language you must use precisely. Situation ethics is teleological. Situation ethics is consequentialist. Situation ethics is not utilitarian. If you write in an essay that situation ethics is a form of utilitarianism, you will lose marks. The theories are structurally similar, but philosophically distinct. Know the difference and state it clearly. Fletcher proposed then 4 working principles, practical commitments that guide how a situationist approaches every moral decision. These are not rules, these are attitudes, orientations, ways of approaching a situation. Let's look at the first one, pragmatism. The action must work. It is not enough to intend love. The means you choose must be practically capable of achieving a loving outcome. If your decision cannot realistically produce Agapē in this situation, it fails the pragmatic test. Number 2 is relativism. All moral decisions are relative to the situation. No rule is universally binding. Context is everything. The same action that is right in one situation may be wrong in another. This does not mean anything goes. It means love is always the constant, and everything else is variable. 3. Positivism. This one surprises students quite often. Fletcher is not saying that love can be proved by reason or derived from first principles. Love is freely chosen as the starting point. It is a faith commitment. You begin by choosing to place love at the center of your ethics. This is theological positivism, a free act of commitment rather than a logical conclusion. And fourth is personalism. People always come first. Before rules, before doctrines, before institutional requirements, persons have intrinsic worth. Notice how directly this responds to the justice problem that we looked at in the Utilitarianism series. Where utilitarianism risks treating people as receptacles for utility, situation ethics insists that the person in front of you is always the primary moral reality. So let's evaluate the theory honestly, because strong essays acknowledge both sides before reaching a judgment. So let's have a look at the strengths. Situation ethics is genuinely flexible and compassionate. It responds to the real complexity of human situations rather than imposing a template. Life presents us with dilemmas that no rulebook ever anticipated. Situation ethics at least tries to meet people where they are at. Its personalism places human dignity at the moral center. And this is philosophically attractive and theologically coherent. The person matters far more than the principle. It also avoids the moral rigidity that critics identify in natural law, a theory which, taken strictly, can produce conclusions that seem to condemn people rather than help them. And it's also rooted in a recognizable Christian tradition, which gives it theological authority for those who believe in the Christian teachings. But it does have some clear weaknesses. The most serious objection is how subjective it is. Who decides what the most loving act is? And in very difficult cases like euthanasia, war, capital punishment, reasonable people motivated by genuine love will often reach opposite conclusions. Agapē provides no mechanism for resolving any of that disagreement. There's also the problem of consequentialist uncertainty. We cannot reliably predict the consequences of our actions. Good intentions expressed as loving choices may produce terrible outcomes. Now, Fletcher never defines Agapē with sufficient precision for practical use. The theory's core concept remains frustratingly vague at exactly the moments when clarity is most needed. And there's a serious risk of abuse. Virtually any action can be justified if the agent sincerely claims it was the most loving thing to do. And therefore the theory offers no external check on self-deception or motivated reasoning. This is the application. And this is where we can scaffold your essay. And the three contrasts that I'm presenting here are the ones that examiners often look for. Situation ethics versus natural law. Natural law is deontological. It's rule-based. It's absolute. It holds that certain acts are intrinsically right or wrong, regardless of the context. Fletcher's theory is directly opposed to this. Context and love always override fixed precepts. And this is one of the strongest evaluative contrasts in A-level ethics, because the two theories disagree not just about specific moral questions, but about the fundamental nature of morality itself. We also can compare situation ethics with Kantian ethics. Kant's categorical imperative demands universal rules that apply regardless of outcome or circumstance. Fletcher rejects universality entirely. He insists that each situation is unique and that no rule can be universalized without distorting the moral reality it was meant to address. And another powerful contrast, and one that goes to the heart of the rule versus situation debate, is comparing it to utilitarianism. Both are consequentialist, but as we established on the previous slide, they differ fundamentally in their criterion. Utilitarianism maximizes happiness, impartiality, and aims for calculability. Situation ethics maximizes Agapē with a specifically Christian grounding that resists reduction to calculation. And here's the essay technique that scores well across all of the exam boards. State the classification first. Is the theory teleological or deontological? Then identify the criterion: love, happiness, duty. Then evaluate. That three-step structure gives your essay a logical architecture that examiners recognize and reward. And so here's some key terminology for the exam. Before you record or revise, make sure every one of these terms is completely secure. The must-know vocabulary. Agapē. Unconditional, selfless love for all persons equally. The sole absolute in situation ethics. Everything else is relative to the situation. Legalism. The application of fixed moral rules regardless of context. The approach Fletcher explicitly rejects as the first of his three alternatives. Antinomianism. The rejection of all moral rules. The second extreme Fletcher rejects, describing it as moral chaos. Teleological. Judging actions by their ends or outcomes. The category into which situation ethics falls. Be precise, this is teleological, not utilitarian. The four working principles: pragmatism, relativism, positivism, personalism. Fletcher's four practical commitments. Know all four by name and explain each one. The new morality. Fletcher's own phrase for his approach. Ethics renewed for a changing world, positioned between legalism and antinomianism. Situationism. The middle way. Entering moral situations with the wisdom of tradition, but remaining always prepared to let love override rules. And positivism, theological positivism, the free commitment to love as a starting point of faith, not derived from reason alone. This is easily confused with philosophical positivism, which you might study in another ethical topic, metaethics, and you might study in religious language in philosophy. Make sure you specify the theological sense when you write about Fletcher's theological positivism.